Yeah, so I guess the 9 signs put peanut butter on it.
Really?
Oh, look!
Hi!
Welcome!
You're just in time for a Brave New World discussion.
We were waiting for you.
Grab a seat. No? Okay.
Alright, well, I thought one of the themes, personally, was what is the cost of true happiness? And is it really, it's not really worth it to give up all of your emotions, all basic human relationships, all art, science, and all basic truths, and basically, like, free thinking, just to achieve happiness. And I think that was a big theme throughout the story. What do you think?
Yeah, that definitely. Completely agreeing with you. Because, like, you know, it says how, like, people complain a lot about having to be sad, but you don't really think of all these things you do have. So it's
Yeah.
kind of saying how they don't have it.
It's interesting because you were talking about how the Apilsons earlier were saying that one of the alphas had asked, I believe it was Bernard, had asked, well, why do we have them? And then the controller was saying, well, they're content doing their work because they don't know anything else. If you were to have an alpha do Apilson work, they of course would want to achieve more because they knew they could. However, Apilsons are kind of dumbed down so that they love what they do. But in the same way, alphas are kind of like Apilsons because they don't know true happiness or true human relationships or love or art or science or any of the great things we have. But if they did, they obviously would want to have what we have. That's why we kind of read the book in such a way where it's like, oh, look at these people, like these poor people, they don't know what they're missing.
Yeah, and that's why they condition all the people, like, on different levels, and there's different categories, because there's a bunch of jobs that need to happen. And that's why, like, I wouldn't be content, you know, going to do one thing, whereas another person might. So they had to condition them so there's enough people to do enough jobs and stuff.
Did you find the characters likable?
For the most part, no.
Yeah. I know, especially if you go through all of them. Bernard, I didn't really like. He was...
No, because he couldn't keep with his word at all throughout the book.
Exactly. Like, in the beginning, he wanted to change society because he didn't belong to it. And then once he finally did belong to it, he was like, oh, okay, he didn't really keep his ideals. He would still tell people about his ideas for changing society, but only because he liked to hear himself talk, and and that they would listen to him made him feel more important, more self-important.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because he actually believed in them. And, you know, Lenina is the picture of society, I think. She's kind of, like, the perfect person in their society.
They, like, have her just to kind of, like, show, like, what everyone else is feeling. I feel like she's just, like, they put it all into one person so that at least we could understand how everyone else in the society is just completely conditioned because she's, like, that perfect being, kind of like that one that they conditioned.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think she was kind of vapid, though, and she could have been more. She could have... I wanted her at the end to kind of, like, turn, and I wanted her to actually have some depth and maybe, like, join John and run away together or something.
Yeah.
And that didn't happen. Even at the end when they were, all the people were watching John, she was with Henry. So she obviously, like, she didn't learn her lesson.
Nope.
Which was unfortunate.
And it also shows how strong their conditioning is. Like, that's what she believes, like, just because they did all that, and then you can really see, like, how much that really makes a difference on someone.
What did you think of John?
I liked John. I didn't love him, but I feel like out of all the characters, of course he's the most relatable to us, because he wasn't conditioned. So I guess that makes him more interesting for us to read about him.
Yeah.
So, I gotta say he's more interesting, too.
He's more interesting, but I didn't like how the controller kind of, in essence, talked him out of starting his... Because John was ready to revolt. He was people in the streets, and the controller kind of talked him down, and he lost his fire, and I didn't really like... I was thinking, the only character I really liked was Helmholtz, because although I think the book should have paid him more attention, because in the beginning you see he's starting to have kind of... He doesn't really trust society anymore, and he doesn't trust the common practices, and then towards the end of the book, he's right with John, they're totally kind of on the same page. And it's really interesting because we don't really get to see the journey he took to realize that the society he was in was wrong. And the author just kind of skipped over that, so I think maybe they should have paid a little more attention to him.
Hannah, would you like to meet any of the characters?
I guess just Helmholtz, I guess. Yeah. I would like to see what he went through when the author wasn't covering him.
Oh, that's interesting. Then you could really, like, actually know what went on, since Huxley didn't want to talk about him, you could actually ask him in person.
Yes, that would be nice. Now, throughout the story, did you notice some of the characters just kind of drop out of the story?
There was a couple, actually, that I noticed that dropped out. Bernard, for some reason, like, he was pretty much the main deal for most of it.
Yeah.
But then he kind of got not taken over in the novel, but I mean, John kind of replaced him as the main character for at least a good part of it. Like, Bernard was still in it, but he definitely, wasn't as much as John. The position kind of changed.
Now, and do you think this makes them unimportant?
No, because without Bernard,
None of
none of it would have happened. So no, he was important. He just didn't last as long as like a full main character would have.
It's kind of like in the beginning when I was began to read, I thought the director was going to play, the Hatchie was going to play a huge part. But then, of course, he did play a huge part. He's John's father.
Yeah.
But he kind of, after John humiliated him, he kind of just exited the story, never to be heard from again.
Yeah, so like he was still important, but he wasn't too talked about.
I like, though, that they didn't stick with one set of characters throughout the entire thing, because I thought the story more focused on the world in which they lived in, and it would have not been as much about that if it was just a set, like, 2 or 3 characters throughout the entire thing. If you got to see everyone's different point of view, you got a more broad view.
Yeah, right, because it wasn't about the one character, so there was really no need to have the one main character. So
Yeah.
it did make it more.
It was more, I guess, about the clash of the utopian society versus what John was bringing to the picture. Okay, one of the interesting elements was John and Lenina's relationship.
Yes.
Because I believe that I didn't really like Lenina as a character, but I really think she loved John in the only way she knew how.
Yeah,
As
because
a
they
person.
weren't taught to actually have
A
full-fledged
relationship.
relationships. The
Yeah.
movie about the helicopter guy, they thought what was shocking is that that guy was just with that one girl for 3 weeks.
Exactly.
So they don't know that it's a woman.
Exactly, and then the movie, The Happily Ever After, was she was a mistress to the 3 guys who rescued her and didn't fall in love with her captor, which is a break from movies today, obviously. But yeah, she knew she felt attracted to John, and so she kind of showed it in the only way she knew how, and he rejected her because that wasn't how he was taught how to love people. And he wanted a serious relationship with her, like a one-on-one, and she wasn't ready for that because she didn't know that was normal or how to have that. Oh, what do you think about Bernard in contrast and comparison to John?
Well, I think there's only one main, uniting factor, is that because they were mainly the 2 outcasts of their society. So that's kind of how they kind of came together, I guess. But there's not much more, I think, that's too similar about them.
I know, yeah, and they were definitely in it for different reasons. John, just when he went to the Utopia, he just wanted to kind of bring his values to them and say, look at what you could be having, look at all this happiness that I've had, look at all the sadness that I've had, you could all have this too. And Bernard just kind of, he wanted to fit in.
Yeah.
He really didn't want to change anything, like even, I think, as you were saying earlier, in the riot scene,
Yeah.
he didn't know, he didn't join in right away. He was kind of like pointing them out, like, look, they're over there, go get them.
Yeah, he didn't want to have that mark on him.
Yeah.
Like, because he knew once, if he participated in this, so-called riot,
Yeah.
then they would always know of him as some rebellious man, and he would never actually fit in. And that's all he really wanted.
Yeah, exactly. And in the same essence, how does the reservation compare with Bernard's society?
Well, they weren't conditioned, so all the people in the reservation, they think their own thoughts. They
Yeah.
speak their own line. They're not just, like, all identical twins of each other. They're all actually individuals, so that's the main difference.
Yeah, they're individuals. They have relationships with each other, like monogamous relationships. They get married, and it's a lot freer.
Yeah, it's more like our world today, so I guess they were comparing that.
I believe one of the characters at some time, John was saying, but you could be free, and they were saying, well, we are free. And he's like, no, you're not. You're conditioned when you're babies to believe this stuff, and you're not free. You're missing out on so much.
Yeah.
The title comes from the Shakespearean play The Tempest, in which there's a character, Miranda, who says the line, and she had been living with her father and her father's slaves, isolated on an island, and she sees, the first time she sees other signs of humanity. She says, "Oh, brave new world." Except the creatures she sees, at first she thinks are these great creations, but they're really drunken sailors.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not the best that has to offer. And that's kind of, Miranda is like John in a way, because at first when he sees the new society, he's like, "Oh, brave new world," and he's so excited, and he's like, "Look at all the great possibilities this has for me. I can finally get out. It's so open." And then he gets there and he realizes that it's not really what he wanted. They're less free than he is.
Right. And he just thinks, because, like, if we were to see a whole other society that people claim to be so great, because, of course, we see all, like, the bad things. We know there's sadness and stuff. So if we were to probably see something like that, we would probably initially think that also, until we got there, just like it happened in the book, and we realized it wasn't up to any good.
Exactly. Now, in the book, it's integral in their society that they use soma. Any thoughts?
Well, of course, Soma we think is the weirdest thing, because we have to deal with our emotions. We have to, we have to deal with it, as unpleasant as it can be sometimes. And this Soma thing just kind of covers it up for them. It's like the government's way of saying, this society is so good, you don't even need to deal with negative emotions.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how they keep their stability, their
Right.
soma. And it's kind of an allusion to drugs nowadays. It's people. That's why people take them to mask their emotions, so that they don't have to feel them. And
Right.
it's glorified in the utopian society. But nowadays, we're so contrasted with them, because we're like, no, you really have to deal with everything that's thrown your way. You can't just take an easy out.
Right.
But that's what they do.
Yeah, like now it's like, so, talk about whatever,
Yeah.
really get into your emotions and whatever. And here it's just like, block all that out, none of it matters. Just do your job. And
Now, what did you think? I believe the controller when he was talking about stability, if you had emotions and you had arts and you had sciences, it was unstable. What do you think about that?
well, of course it can be unstable. I mean, there's rich people living in mansions, and then there's poor people living out on the streets. I mean, there's a lot of imbalance, and there's a lot of instability. So I guess in their new world they have, their thing, it is more stable, that's true, but I mean, you're sacrificing so much to have it be that way.
Yes, exactly. Is the ending of the Brave New World at all optimistic for any of the characters?
Some of them.
Yes, some of them. Yeah, like Helmholtz, again. Because all he wanted to pen a great work of writing, and he now gets the chance to, in
Right.
seclusion, which is kind of what he all wanted. He was looking for his big, he knew he was called to do something, he didn't know what, and now he does know what, and he gets to go do that.
Mm-hmm.
But for the rest of it kind of ended on uneasy terms.
Well, of course, we all know John. Moment of silence for John.
And we're back.
But anyway, as you might say, why would you want to continue living like that anyway? But of course it wasn't really optimistic. His optimistic thing would be is his revolution took place and turned out well.
Yeah, and everyone's now free like he is. But that didn't happen.
Yeah, or even if he was able to go back to reservation and be accepted, that would still be an optimistic thing for him.
Yeah, that didn't.
No,
Bernard,
definitely.
it wasn't optimistic because he was being dragged kicking and screaming. He didn't want to go to Iceland.
No.
The controller said he considered Bernard lucky because he gets to interact with all these people who have similar ideals. But Bernard didn't really see himself as lucky because he just wanted to be a part of the society, and society is now just kind of kicking him to the curb. And Lenina, she didn't change at all.
Nope, she just probably, day after the book ended, back to the same thing she would do every day. Didn't seem like she made much change at all.
So yeah, that wasn't a very optimistic ending for most of them. Okay.